She arrived at the restaurant a little earlier than planned, holding her son's hand as they walked through the glass doors. The place was known for its calm music, soft lights, and quiet voices. People came here to feel important, to forget the noise of the world outside. She had eaten in places like this many times before, but tonight felt different. She was tired in a way money could not fix. Her son walked beside her, small fingers wrapped around hers, looking around with wide eyes. He liked the shiny floors and the tall walls. To him, it felt like a special night. To her, it was an attempt to be present, an attempt to feel close to him again. They were shown to a table near the window. The city lights glowed outside, and cars passed like slow-moving stars. She helped her son into his seat and smiled at him. He smiled back, but she noticed how quickly he turned to look at his tablet once it was placed in front of him. That small moment stung more than she expected. She had built companies, signed deals worth more than most people would see in a lifetime, and stood on stages where crowds applauded her name. But sitting across from her own child, she often felt unsure. After her husband died, work became her shield. Meetings replaced conversations. Success filled the silence, but it never warmed it. A waiter came with menus. She ordered without really looking, choosing familiar dishes. Her son asked for something simple. She nodded, barely hearing him, her thoughts drifting far away. She stared out the window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a moment, she barely recognized herself. Then something pulled her attention back into the room. Across the restaurant, near a wall that didn't catch much light, sat a man and a young child. The man's shoulders were slumped, his clothes clean but warm. His shoes looked tired, like they had carried him through too many long days. The child sat straight, swinging her legs slightly, looking around with wonder, much like her own son had when they walked in. The man opened the menu slowly, as if reading it took effort. She watched as his eyes moved from one price to another. After a few seconds, he closed it and rubbed his face. He pulled a small wallet from his pocket and opened it just enough to peek inside. Then he sighed, quietly but deeply. She felt something tighten in her chest. Her son looked up from his screen. "Mom," he said softly, "that girl looks happy." She followed his gaze again. The child across the room was smiling at her father, talking with her hands, clearly telling a story only he could understand. The man listened closely, nodding, forcing a smile, even though his eyes looked tired. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, giving her his full attention. "Yes," she replied, after a pause. "She does." The waiter approached that table. The man spoke politely, pointing to one item on the menu. Just one. When the waiter left, the man leaned back and took a slow breath, like he had just finished a difficult task. Her food arrived, placed neatly on white plates. Steam rose gently. The smell was rich and warm. She thanked the waiter without looking up. Her son started eating, focused and quiet. She lifted her fork but didn't take a bite. Her eyes kept drifting back. The child's food arrived first. A simple meal. The man thanked the waiter again. When his own plate came, it was smaller, plainer. He pushed it slightly toward the child instead of himself. "No, Daddy," the girl said, shaking her head. "I'm fine," he replied gently. "I already ate." She could tell he was lying. Not from his words, but from the way he swallowed and looked away. Her son noticed too. He stopped eating and leaned closer to her. "Why isn't he eating?" he whispered. She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. How did she explain that some parents choose hunger so their children don't have to? How did she explain that love sometimes looks like an empty plate? "Maybe he's not hungry," she said finally, though she knew it wasn't true. The man picked up his fork, took a small bite, then put it down. He smiled at his daughter and wiped her mouth with a napkin when some sauce spilled. He laughed softly when she apologized, telling her it was okay. His laughter didn't last long, but it was real. She felt a strange pull in her chest, like an old memory waking up. She remembered being young, sitting at small tables with her own mother, meals stretched carefully to last the week. She remembered smiles that hid worry. She had promised herself that if she ever escaped that life, she would never look back. Yet here she was, looking straight at it. The restaurant buzzed quietly around them. Glasses clinked. Soft music played. Other diners talked about business, vacations, plans. None of them seemed to notice the small table in the corner. Her son pushed his plate away. "I'm full," he said. She glanced at his plate. Half the food was untouched. She felt another sting, sharper this time. Without thinking, she reached for his plate and slid it toward herself. "Eat a little more," she said gently. He frowned, but took another bite. Across the room, the man helped his daughter drink water, holding the glass steady. His hands were rough, marked by work. Hands that had carried heavy things. Hands that had probably done more than one job in a single day. The woman shifted in her chair. Her heart beat faster, though she didn't know why. She told herself it wasn't her place, that she couldn't fix every problem, that this was just a dinner, but it didn't feel like just a dinner anymore. Her son leaned his head against her arm, something he hadn't done in a long time. She froze for a second, then relaxed, letting him rest there. She placed her hand gently on his hair. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we help them?" The question came without fear, without pride, without thought of cost. Just simple concern. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. When she opened them, she looked again at the man and his child. She saw more than worn clothes and small portions. She saw effort. She saw care. She saw a parent trying to give a child a normal night in a world that wasn't being kind. The waiter passed by their table. She looked up at him, then back at the other table. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. Her heart felt heavy, but also strangely clear. Something inside her shifted. This night, which she had planned as a quiet dinner to fill a space on her calendar, was turning into something else entirely. She didn't know what she would do yet. She only knew she couldn't unsee what she had seen. And for the first time in a long while, she wasn't sure walking away was an option. She couldn't stop watching them. Every little movement, every small gesture, seemed to speak louder than words. The single father adjusted the chair for his daughter, making sure her feet could touch the ground. When she giggled at something on the menu, he laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It was quiet, simple, ordinary, yet it struck her in a way that wealth never had. She felt her son tugging at her sleeve. "Mom, look at how he listens to her," he whispered. "He really listens." "Yes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "He does." Her own words felt hollow, even to her. Listening was something she had forgotten to do in her life, filled with meetings, calls, and endless emails. Her son looked at her, waiting for more, as if he already knew the truth she was trying to hide from herself. The man reached across the table and gently took his daughter's hand, holding it for a moment before letting go. She noticed how his eyes softened when he looked at her. There was no judgment, no impatience, just attention. The billionaire tried to remember the last time anyone had looked at her that way. She couldn't. Her life had been measured in profits, stocks, and business decisions, not small human moments like this. The girl suddenly dropped her spoon. It clattered on the floor, and her father quickly leaned down to pick it up. "It's okay," he said softly. "Accidents happen." His voice was calm, patient, full of care. The girl smiled sheepishly, hugging her plate closer. The billionaire's heart tightened. How could someone show such care without hesitation, without calculation, without expectation? Of anything in return? Her son looked up at her, eyes wide. "Mom, why isn't he upset?" he asked Dot. She hesitated. How could she explain that sometimes love didn't need anger to teach? That sometimes patience was the strongest lesson of all? "Because he cares about her," she said finally, softly. "That's why." Her son frowned, as if thinking this over. "I want to be like that," he said quietly. She felt a lump in her throat. He wanted to care like this. He wanted to be patient, kind, present. And she had been so caught up in her world that she didn't always show him how. The father took a bite of his meal now, small, careful, sharing more of it with his daughter than keeping for himself. She noticed his eyes flicker briefly toward her table, almost as if he sensed someone watching. She looked away quickly, ashamed that she had been staring. But she couldn't stop noticing him. Every gesture was intentional. Every smile, every nod, every soft laugh he gave to his daughter was something she realized she had missed in her own life. She remembered her husband, yes, but she also remembered herself before the world had forced her to build walls. The man across the room reminded her of a life she had almost forgotten existed. Her son leaned over the table. "Mom, he's tired, isn't he?" "Yes," she admitted softly. "I think he is." The child's eyes sparkled with innocence, oblivious to the struggle behind the worn clothes and tired eyes. She asked her father about small things, a story she wanted to hear, a question about the menu, a silly observation about the lights in the restaurant. The man answered each one carefully, never rushing, never showing his exhaustion except in the small lines around his eyes. The billionaire watched as he gently explained how they make food in the kitchen, how the lights change color in the evening, how the music helps people feel calm. She realized he was creating magic for his daughter, a small world where nothing hurt, where he could shield her from the weight of life, even if only for a little while. Her son watched him too, silent now, clearly thinking about what he saw. She could tell he was comparing his life of comfort and abundance with this man's life of struggle and devotion. Her son's eyes reflected curiosity and admiration, a mix of emotions that made her chest ache. The waiter returned, bringing a glass of water for the girl. She fumbled with it slightly, trying to hold it steady. The father reached across the table, steadying the glass and guiding her hand. She felt something inside him that was patient, consistent, and unconditional. It was the kind of care that couldn't be bought or taught in a business school. The billionaire tried to imagine what his life must be like outside this restaurant. She imagined early mornings, working multiple jobs, finding ways to pay bills, worrying constantly about whether his daughter had what she needed. Yet here he was, still present, still kind, still making her daughter feel like she was the most important person in the world. Not her son spoke again. "Mom, I want to know him. I want to be friends." She looked at him, surprised. He had never spoken this way about someone who wasn't rich, famous, or part of their world. This wasn't about status or privilege. It was simple human admiration. And she felt her heart respond. "Maybe one day," she said softly, not sure if she was promising or just hoping. She tried to return to her meal, but the food no longer tasted right. Her thoughts kept drifting back to the little table in the corner. She realized that she had spent so long chasing success. She had almost forgotten how to see people for who they were, how to feel compassion without conditions, how to notice effort and love that didn't come with wealth or status. The father suddenly leaned down to adjust his daughter's seat, pulling it closer to the table. She smiled up at him, chatting quietly. He listened attentively, nodding, encouraging her words. The billionaire noticed the patience in his actions, the deliberate effort to make her daughter feel safe and valued. It struck her how much effort it took to be this kind when life was not easy, when resources were scarce, when every day was a challenge. Her son tugged on her sleeve again. "Mom, he loves her so much," he said, voice full of awe. "Yes," she whispered. "He does." A small wave of emotion swept through her. She felt pride for her son, wanting to understand love and care. But she also felt a pang of guilt for the time she had been absent, distracted by meetings, calls, and responsibilities that now seemed trivial. She realized that watching this man was teaching both of them something money could never buy. The girl dropped a napkin, and he quickly picked it up, smiling at her. "Thank you, Daddy," she said. His eyes softened, and he squeezed her hand gently. Her son looked at her. "Mom, I want to be that kind of dad when I grow up. I want to care like that." Tears pricked at the edges of her eyes. She swallowed hard, nodding. "I know, sweetheart. And you can." She watched him for a long moment, seeing the effort in every small act, brushing crumbs off the table, lifting the glass carefully, leaning in to hear her words, never showing frustration. She understood that love like this was not easy. It was patience, it was sacrifice. It was showing up every single day, even when life was exhausting. Her son reached for her hand. "Mom, can we help him?" She hesitated. She wasn't sure if it was appropriate. But she felt her chest tighten, knowing that her son had already decided for them both. He had seen kindness, effort, and love, and he wanted to be part of it. The father laughed softly at something his daughter said, a sound full of warmth and humility. She felt a deep respect for him, for the way he carried responsibility, for the way he made his daughter feel safe, happy, and loved. She realized that real courage was not in power or money, but in showing up for someone every day, even when life made it hard. Her son leaned his head against her arm. "Mom, I think he's amazing," he whispered. "Yes," she said quietly, tears forming in her eyes. "He is." For the first time that evening, she put her fork down, unable to eat. She wanted to keep watching, to learn, to understand. She wanted to see how someone could be so dedicated, so patient, so full of love, without expecting anything in return. The man across the room adjusted the chair, smiled at his daughter, and whispered something that made her giggle. She watched. The small moment, realizing how much care went into something so simple. She realized that watching them was teaching her something she had never learned from business, money, or fame, that love and kindness required attention, effort, and heart. Her son squeezed her hand. "Mom, can we talk to him?" She hesitated, but in that hesitation, she realized she didn't want to walk away. She didn't want to just watch anymore. Something inside her was shifting. The world she lived in, filled with wealth and power, felt suddenly empty. The world in that small corner, full of effort, patience, and love, felt real, tangible, and necessary. She nodded to her son. "Yes," she said softly. "One day soon we will." The father adjusted the napkin on the table, brushed a crumb off his daughter's dress, and laughed softly at her tiny joke. He was tired, she could tell, but his effort never faltered. She felt a stirring in her chest, a realization that life was measured not by money, not by power, but by the small acts of care that made someone feel safe, seen, and loved. Her son leaned against her, eyes still fixed on the little table. "Mom, I hope we can be like that," he said softly. "Yes," she whispered, holding him close. "We will try." And in that moment, watching the single father and his daughter, she understood that this night was no longer just a dinner. It had become a lesson, a turning point, a glimpse into a world she had forgotten existed. A world where love, patience, and effort mattered more than anything money could buy. Her heart felt full, yet heavy, as she realized she had much to learn. And she knew somehow that this small table in the corner had already begun to change both her and her son, in ways neither of them could forget. She couldn't take her eyes off them. Every small movement of the single father and his daughter seemed to tell a story she had never truly seen before. The father's patience, the way he laughed softly at his daughter's jokes, how he kept checking to make sure she was comfortable, it all made her heart ache. It was simple, quiet, ordinary, but it felt extraordinary to her. Her son had leaned forward in his chair, eyes wide with curiosity and admiration. "Mom," he whispered, "why is he being so kind? Doesn't he get tired?" "Yes," she said softly, "but he keeps going because he cares." The girl dropped her spoon again, giggling this time instead of crying. The man bent down and picked it up, smiling. "It's okay," he said gently. "No problem at all." He placed the spoon back in her hand and gave her a soft pat on the back. Her son looked at her. "Mom, I want to be like him when I grow up. I want to care like that." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of those words. She had spent her life teaching her son about success, achievements, and hard work. But here was a lesson he was learning without her guidance, the lesson of patience, kindness, and unwavering love. She wanted to intervene, but didn't. She wanted to watch, to learn, to understand. Something inside her stirred, a deep ache combined with awe. She realized that no amount of wealth could replace what she was seeing right in front of her. Suddenly, the waiter returned, approaching the single father's table with a polite but careful expression. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly. "I just wanted to remind you that the payment for the meal is due. I need to collect it before you leave." The man's shoulders slumped slightly, a shadow crossing his face. He opened his wallet again, counting the few bills he had inside. His fingers trembled slightly. He looked at the total on the receipt, then back at his daughter, who was smiling up at him, unaware of the tension. I don't have enough right now," he said softly. "Is there any way I can?" The waiter hesitated, then said firmly, "Sir, I'm sorry, but I have to ask you to either pay now or find another solution." Her heart skipped a beat. She felt the sudden, sharp sting of helplessness radiating from that table. The man's pride was visible, even as he tried to think of a way out. He looked at his daughter, trying to hide his worry, trying to keep the moment normal for her. She could see the quiet courage it took to hold himself together. Her son tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, can't we help?" She hesitated. She had always avoided these situations, thinking money solved everything. But this wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about respect, about protecting someone who deserved kindness. Before she could think further, she stood up from her seat. Her son looked up, surprised. She smoothed her dress and walked confidently across the room. All eyes turned toward her as she approached the small table in the corner. She could feel the tension shift, the quiet curiosity of other diners as they sensed something different was happening. She reached the table and smiled gently at the man. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I will take care of the bill." He looked up at her, eyes wide with surprise and a hint of disbelief. "I can't accept that," he said quietly, almost shaking his head. "You don't need to argue," she said. "Please, consider it my gift." The girl looked up at her, eyes shining with innocence and wonder. She smiled, sensing the kindness but not fully understanding it. The father still looked unsure, torn between pride and necessity. "Thank you," he said finally, his voice low but sincere. "Thank you so much." She nodded, feeling a strange warmth spread through her chest. Then, without hesitation, she pulled out a chair and sat down with them. Her son followed, sitting quietly beside her. The man's eyes widened further. He looked like he wasn't sure what to do. "This is unexpected," he said softly, still holding his daughter's hand. "I wanted to meet you," she said gently. "I wanted to see who you are, and I wanted my son to see something important too. The father blinked. He had never been treated like this before, not with wealth, not with status, not with any of the strangers who had passed by. Her presence wasn't about charity alone. It was about recognition, about seeing the effort he had put into being a good father, and honoring it. Her son looked at him with admiration. "I've never met someone like you," he said honestly. "You're really kind, and you really care about your daughter." The man swallowed, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. He glanced at his daughter, then back at the woman and her son. "I'm just trying," he said quietly. "I try every day to be there for her. That's all I can do." "You're doing more than enough," she said softly. "More than you know." For a moment, silence fell over the table. The restaurant's quiet hum felt distant. She noticed every small detail, the way he kept adjusting his daughter's chair, the way he encouraged her to speak. The small gestures of care that cost him nothing, but meant everything. Her son leaned forward. "Mom, can we spend more time with them?" he asked. "I want to learn from him." She looked at him and nodded. "Yes, we can." The father looked at her again, hesitant. "I don't want to impose," he said. "I don't know. I'm not used to this." "You're not imposing," she said gently. "You've already given your daughter the best gift, your attention and love. That's all anyone could ever ask for." The girl giggled at something her father whispered. He laughed softly in return, and she felt a deep connection to the quiet strength he carried. She realized that this man, despite the hardships, was creating a world of safety and happiness for his daughter. One small act at a time, she could feel her son watching intently, absorbing every lesson without needing words. She understood that this encounter was becoming a teaching moment, not just for her son, but for herself as well. She had spent so long in her world of wealth and power, thinking that success was measured by money and status. But here, at a small corner table in a restaurant, she was witnessing a different kind of success, a success measured by love, patience, and selfless dedication. The waiter returned, carrying a small plate of dessert for the little girl. She clapped her hands in excitement. The father smiled, helping her with the fork and making sure she didn't spill. He took a small bite himself, still sharing most of it with her. She noticed the pride in his eyes, quiet and steady. Her son whispered to her, "Mom, I think he's the strongest person I've ever seen." She nodded, feeling tears welling up. "Yes," she said softly, "stronger than anyone with money or power." She realized that this night, which she had thought would be a simple dinner with her son, had turned into something far more important. It was a lesson about humanity, compassion, and the quiet heroism that exists in everyday life. The father finally leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. His daughter looked at him, smiling, and he smiled back. She could see the relief, the exhaustion, and the quiet pride in his expression. Her son leaned closer. "Mom, can we come back tomorrow?" She smiled at him, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. "We'll see," she said softly. "We'll see." She watched them for a long moment, feeling a shift inside herself. The walls she had built around her heart, the walls built from loss, stress, and years of self-protection, were beginning to crumble. She understood now that real connection, real love, and real impact weren't found in wealth or power. They were found in attention, in presence, and in small acts of care that could change lives. The man looked at her again, this time with a small, shy smile. "Thank you for this," he said quietly. "For everything." She nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "No," she said softly. "Thank you for showing us what truly matters." Her son squeezed her hand. "Mom, I want to be like him," he whispered. "Yes," she said, holding his hand tightly. "We'll try, together." And in that small restaurant, At a small table in the corner, she realized that sometimes the most unbelievable moments of life weren't planned. They happened quietly, in the attention given, in the love shown, in the courage to care when the world didn't make it easy. This night, which had started as a simple dinner, had already changed them all in ways they would never forget. She could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of so many days spent working, worrying, and doing everything she could never fully understand from her world of luxury. Yet he still smiled, still leaned toward his daughter when she spoke, still held her hand gently. There was a quiet dignity in the way he carried himself, a strength that came not from power or wealth, but from responsibility and love. Her son leaned closer, watching intently, clearly soaking in every detail. "Mom," he whispered, "he never gives up on her, does he?" "No," she replied softly. "Not for a single second." The little girl's laughter filled the quiet space between them, a sound so bright and pure that it seemed to make the whole restaurant feel warmer. The man laughed too, softly, and she noticed how it was different from the laughter of people who are happy because everything is easy. This was laughter earned through struggle, through effort, through love. She realized that she had never seen anything like it before. Wealth had taught her lessons about numbers, contracts, and strategy, but nothing had taught her how to be truly human. Watching this man care for his daughter was teaching her son, a lesson that could never be measured in money. Suddenly, her mind shifted. She could no longer remain just an observer. She could feel her son's gaze on her, expectant and hopeful. He had already learned something, but she realized she had the power to take it further. She could turn this small moment into a life-changing one. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "Sir," she said softly, "may I sit with you for a while?" The man blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. I don't want to impose," he said, his voice cautious. "You're not imposing," she said. "I want to sit with you. I want my son to learn from you. And I want to see the world through your eyes for a little while." He looked at her, searching her face for motives, for judgment, for anything that would make him doubt her. But all he saw was sincerity, genuine interest, and a kind of respect he had never experienced from someone in her position. Slowly, he nodded. "Of course," he said quietly. She pulled a chair and sat down beside him. Her son followed, settling close to her. The little girl's eyes widened slightly, curious about the new company. She smiled, feeling instantly safe and accepted, as if the presence of another adult who cared didn't threaten her world at all. For a long moment, there was silence. The man seemed unsure how to respond, still adjusting to the idea that someone had not only noticed his effort, but wanted to honor it. Then, carefully, he began to speak. "My wife. She passed a few years ago," he said quietly, glancing down at his hands. "I've been doing my best to give her everything she needs, everything I can. Some days are harder than others. Some days I don't think I can make it through. But I try. For her." Her heart tightened. She could see the quiet pain behind the words, the resilience it took to continue each day. She thought about her own life, the privileges she had taken for granted, the obstacles she had thought were impossible that paled in comparison to what he endured. Her son reached out, placing his small hand gently over the man's. "You're really brave," he said softly. "I wish I could be brave like you." The father's eyes glistened with emotion. He had never received words like this from anyone, especially not from someone so young. He looked at the boy, then at the woman beside him, and for the first time allowed himself to feel the weight of admiration and acknowledgement he had long been denied. She cleared her throat, feeling a determination growing inside her. "I want to help you," she said simply. "I don't want to just pay for dinner. I want to do something that changes things for you, not just for a moment, but for the future. The man's eyes widened in disbelief. I don't understand, he said cautiously. I've watched you tonight, she continued, and I see a father who does everything he can for his child. I see love, patience, and courage. And I see someone who deserves support, not just charity, but a real chance to build a stable life for his daughter. I want to offer you a position at my company, a job that comes with stability and benefits. And I will make sure there's support for childcare, so you can continue to be there for her the way you are now. The man shook his head, tears forming in his eyes. I don't know what to say, he whispered. I've never had anyone offer something like this before. Not money, not help, not dignity. Her son looked at him, eyes shining. See, this is how the world can be, he said softly. Kind, brave, and fair. She nodded, feeling a warmth spreading through her chest. You've earned this, not because of your struggle, but because of the love and effort you give every day. That's what matters. The father's voice shook. I don't even know how to thank you. I thought I was just surviving. I didn't think anyone saw the effort behind it. I see it, she said simply. And I want my son to see it too. So he knows that real strength is in care, in patience, in showing up every day, no matter how hard it gets. He looked down at his daughter, who was now giggling at something her father whispered. The way he held her hand, leaned in to listen, encouraged her words. It was all instinctive, natural, and full of love. She could see why he deserved more than just a fleeting gesture. Her son leaned against her arm. Mom, you really did something amazing, he whispered. She smiled softly, tears brimming. Not me, she said. We did it together. By noticing, by caring, by choosing to act. The little girl looked up at her with wide eyes, sensing the change in the air, sensing hope she hadn't felt before. She smiled shyly and whispered, Thank you. The man finally lifted his head, looking at her with gratitude so deep it almost silenced him. I don't know how to explain what this means, he said, voice trembling. I've worked so hard, but no one has ever seen me like this. Not really. You're seen, she said gently. You've always been seen. And now the world will catch up. For a long moment, they sat together in silence. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't forced. It was a quiet acknowledgement of what had just happened, a recognition that lives were shifting in ways that could not be undone. Her son looked up at the father. Will you be our friend? He asked earnestly. A man smiled through tears, nodding. I'd like that, he said softly. Very much. She watched them, feeling a strange peace settle over her. She realized that her own life had been transformed in this small corner of the restaurant. She had thought she was teaching her son about generosity, but in truth, she had learned from this father about love, courage, and the quiet power of care. You've taught us something important tonight, she said finally, her voice steady. Not about money, not about power, but about what it means to really care for someone. The father looked at her, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. And you've reminded me that kindness still exists, he said. That people still notice, that people still care. Her son leaned back in his chair, exhausted from the emotional intensity of the evening. Mom, I'll never forget this night, he said softly. Neither will I, she whispered. They stayed for a while longer, talking quietly, sharing stories, laughing softly at small things. She could see the bond forming, not just between her son and the father, but between the two families. It wasn't about wealth or status anymore. It was about understanding, respect, and human connection. As they finally stood to leave, the father thanked her again. I don't know how to ever repay this, he said. Just keep caring for her, she replied. That's all you need to do. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and calm. She held her son's hand, feeling the weight and the lightness of what had just happened. They had come for a simple dinner, but they had found something far greater, the power of noticing, the courage to act, and the lesson that true generosity is measured by its impact on people's lives, not by its cost. Her son looked up at her, eyes wide and shining. "Mom, we did something amazing tonight." She smiled, squeezing his hand. "Yes, we did," she said softly. "Yes, we did." And as they walked into the quiet night, she knew that the father and daughter they had met would never be forgotten. Nor would the lessons learned in that small corner of the restaurant, lessons about love, courage, and the extraordinary power of small acts done with a full heart. The days after that night felt different for everyone. She noticed it first in her own life. She woke up earlier, not because of work, but because she wanted to spend more time with her son. She watched him as he moved around their home, noticing the small gestures of kindness he had picked up from the single father. It was subtle, at first helping her carry groceries, smiling more at strangers, asking thoughtful questions, but it was there. Her own heart felt lighter. The tension she had carried for years seemed to loosen, replaced by a strange warmth she hadn't realized she was missing. She found herself thinking about the father and his daughter constantly. She wondered how they were doing, whether the little girl was still laughing as freely as she had that night, whether her father was able to rest a little more, knowing someone believed in him. Her son tugged at her sleeve one morning. "Mom, can we visit them today?" he asked eagerly. She smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Yes," she said. "We'll go today." They arrived at the small apartment where the father and daughter lived. It was modest, not luxurious, but it was clean and filled with signs of love. Crayons and paper were aired across the table, and small drawings hung on the walls. The girl ran to the door when she heard them knocking, her face lighting up in a smile that seemed to fill the room with sunlight. "Look, you came back," she exclaimed, hugging her father tightly. He smiled, holding her close for a moment before turning to greet them. His eyes were tired, but they shone with gratitude and something else, hope. He had a chance now, a chance he hadn't known existed before. She knelt to greet the little girl, smiling warmly. "Hello," she said softly. "It's so good to see you again." The girl looked at her curiously, then giggled. "You're my friend, too." Her son laughed, reaching out to hold her hand. "I missed you," he said. The father watched quietly, clearly moved. He had never imagined that someone like her, someone with so much, would take the time to come back, to continue the connection they had started. It wasn't just about money. It was about presence, about noticing, about acting when it mattered most. Over the next few weeks, their visits became a routine. They shared meals together, helped with homework, and played games. She found herself learning from the father as much as her son did. His patience, his resilience, and his unwavering care. For his daughter taught her lessons she hadn't realized she needed. She realized that true strength wasn't in power or wealth. It was in showing up for someone every day, no matter how hard life became. Her son began to mirror these lessons in small but meaningful ways. He helped his classmates, shared his toys without being asked, and spoke more gently to others. She watched him grow, not in wealth or status, but in compassion and understanding. She knew that what they were experiencing together was something rare, something powerful, something that would stay with them forever. The father's life began to change too. With the stability she had offered, he was able to focus more on being a good parent without the constant worry of survival pressing down on him. He took the job at her company seriously, learning quickly, and gaining respect from colleagues who soon saw his dedication and intelligence. The support for childcare, meant he could spend evenings with his daughter, reading stories, playing games, and teaching her about the world in a way he never could have before. One evening, they all sat together at the father's small kitchen table. The girl was coloring, her father helping her stay inside the lines while she giggled at the occasional mistake. Her son watched, fascinated, and she noticed the joy in his eyes, the way he was learning without words, the true meaning of love and care. "I think this is the happiest I've been in a long time," the father said quietly, almost to himself. She looked at him, smiling softly. "I'm glad," she said. "You deserve it." He shook his head, his eyes glistening. "I never imagined life could feel like this again. I was surviving before, just surviving. But now it feels like living." Her son reached across the table, taking his hand. "You taught me how to really care," he said earnestly. "I won't forget it." Tears filled her eyes. She had thought she was helping them, but she realized in that moment how much they were helping her too. They had reminded her of what mattered, of what life was truly about: connection, kindness, and the simple acts of love that make all the difference. Over time, the bond between the families grew stronger. They celebrated birthdays together, shared small victories, and supported each other through challenges. The billionaire noticed that her own son was happier, calmer, and more thoughtful. She felt proud, but also humbled, understanding that the real gift was not something she had given. It was something they had all learned together. She often reflected on that first night, the night when she had seen them in the restaurant and felt something stir inside her. It had been a turning point, a moment when she realized that the world she had built for herself was missing something vital. Watching the father's unwavering dedication had reminded her that wealth alone could never bring happiness, and that the most important things in life could not be bought. Her son would often ask questions about the father and his daughter, curious about their daily lives, their routines, and their dreams. She answered honestly, explaining how effort, love, and persistence could change the world in small but meaningful ways. She encouraged him to practice kindness, to notice others, and to act when it mattered. The father, too, began to see the power of connection. He realized that support could come from unexpected places, and that people could believe in him without judgment. He started to dream again, thinking not just about survival, but about opportunities, education, and building a life that his daughter could be proud of. One evening, as they all sat together, watching the sunset from the small balcony of his apartment, the little girl leaned against her father. "Daddy," she said softly, "I'm happy." He smiled, holding her close. "I'm happy too," he said. Her son looked at them, then at her. "Mom, this is amazing," he whispered. "We helped them, and they helped us too." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes," she said softly, "this is what life is about." The billionaire realized that true wealth was not measured in money, possessions, or titles. It was measured in the lives she touched, the lessons she learned, and the love she shared. That night, sitting with the two children and the father who had shown so much courage, she felt richer than she ever had in a boardroom or at a gala. Time went on, and their lives continued to intertwine. The father became more confident, his daughter thriving with his love, and her mother's guidance indirectly influencing their lives through him. Her son grew into a thoughtful, caring young boy who understood the value of empathy, kindness, and action. She saw in him the reflection of what had been taught not in schools or lessons, but in small, powerful human moments. One day, as they walked together in the park, the father turned to her. "I don't think I'll ever forget what you did for us," he said quietly. "You didn't just give money or help, you gave hope, dignity, and a chance to rebuild our lives." She shook her head, smiling softly. "No," she said, "you gave that to yourself. We just helped you see it." Her son held the little girl's hand, skipping ahead. "We're friends forever," he said brightly. "Yes," she agreed softly, watching them. "Forever." She realized that the world could feel heavy and cruel at times, but moments like these reminded her that it was also full of beauty, resilience, and kindness. That night in the restaurant had started it all, a moment that changed all their lives. It had begun as a simple act of noticing, a choice to care, and it had grown into something far bigger than she could have imagined. The father watched his daughter play, his eyes filled with gratitude. He knew the road ahead would not always be easy, but he also knew he had support, love, and a renewed sense of purpose. He could now imagine a future filled with possibility, not just survival. Her son watched him, learning silently but deeply. He learned that courage came in many forms, that true strength was in patience, compassion, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. And she, standing quietly beside them, felt a profound peace. She had come into their lives to give, but in the process, she had received far more than she could ever have expected. She had rediscovered humanity, love, and the extraordinary impact of small acts done with full hearts. The story of that dinner, of noticing a single father and his daughter, of choosing to act in a world where most walk past without seeing, became a memory that shaped all their lives. It was a lesson in courage, kindness, and the power of connection that could not be measured in money, fame, or success. Years later, they would still remember that night. They would remember the quiet strength of a man who gave everything to his child, the innocence and honesty of two children learning about life, and the choice of a woman who saw something extraordinary in the ordinary. Life continued, full of challenges and joys, but the bond they had formed, the lessons they had learned, and the love they had shared remained unbroken. And in that they found a wealth far greater than any fortune, a wealth of heart, of humanity, and of enduring connection that would shape not just their lives, but the lives of everyone who would hear their story. And so, from a simple dinner in a quiet restaurant, a billionaire, her son, a single father, and his daughter found something rare and unforgettable. They found the power of seeing, the courage to act, and the truth that the greatest riches in life are measured not by what we have, but by the love we give and the lives we touch. They walked forward together into the future, forever changed, forever connected, and forever grateful for the night that started it all.